Many of you, I know, were involved in the phenomenal effort to gather resources to help us build a new children's village for special needs children living in the very worst of circumstances out in Tanzania. I am happy to say that the new house is open, and even today we are moving new children in as I speak. The rest of the village will continue to be under construction for some time to come. I want, however, to take a moment to share with you all some of what we are finding on outreach. We are finding children such as Paul here. Paul is severely malnourished. Paul has been horrendously neglected through poverty and a lack of love and empathy, and probably we can say a cultural superstition that these children are cursed and don't deserve love and a burden and so on. Not only Paul, but we also found little Alvin, which I mentioned in the last video, where he has a protruding hernia and no way to access medical care and is in absolute agony. Other children we are finding, I can't show you. But what I can say is this, that these children need a family, and we are positioned so that we can provide that family. But right now, as we open the new home, we have a lot of needs. Everything from a four-wheel drive to be able to continue doing more and more outreach in the area, to new nursing staff, knives, forks, pillows, beds, everything we are in need of at the moment. And therefore, if you want to continue this journey of helping us to reach as many of these children as possible, and you want to be involved in some way, there will be a link at the bottom of the page to share with you this appeal that we have to try and help us to get through these next months until we gather more partners to support our new monthly needs with all of the new children that we are moving in and all of the new outreach work that we are doing. Thank you for everything that you make possible. If it weren't for you guys, none of these children would have the loving home that they do. All glory to God. Thank you guys. God bless you all. The Olympics have yet again choreographed a ceremony that is filled with satanic symbology, choreographed a ceremony that is almost taunting and mocking the unconscious masses. On the planet at this time, billions of people have brought into the identity of this reality with which they function the term Christian. And to be a Christian is to have a worldview that one must overcome the flesh and walk in the spirit, be in a higher ideal than the proclivity of the five senses and their desires. But within there must also be the understanding that there is an opposition to the Christ, to humanity. And that opposition is a deceiver, the father of lies, as it is said in the scripture. Satan, as it is commonly pointed at. This deceiver is here to lead mankind astray and extract the resource of our intelligence and our energy. This deceiver, therefore, we have to ask, if functioning, if in allegiance with a global cult, which many believe is so, where is the meticulous, organized deception? Where is the scientific, strategic, pre-planned deception of humanity? If there is a father of lies, and that father of lies is in collusion with a global cult that is influencing humanity, that is choreographing these bizarre satanic ceremonies for the masses to see and not understand, why are we not looking for it? And I believe the answer is a pure and a simple one. The boundaries of our imagination are limited by the boundaries of our goodness. And as such, very few can imagine that such deception would exist. But it does. and the ability for those that are in allegiance with Satan, are in allegiance with the fallen ones who are extracting mankind's energy. Their imagination has no boundary of goodness. They are akin to psychopaths. They have no empathy. They do not care. They are willing to embrace deception as a virtue to its fullest capacity. And this is where humanity has a stumbling block. For we have a fallen nature, a slave state, and that slave state does not like to admit that it's been fooled, that it's been tricked. Because to do so, the whole structure of the ego is shaken. A father to admit that he has been deceived for 50 years of his life by these forces, these lower astral forces manifest in the human story, has to admit much to himself, and so a firewall of arrogance comes up and says, I cannot embrace that world image. But Satan is here, and the deception is real. The Olympic ceremony was filled with satanic symbology, and it is not the first time. And I have mentioned recently about this, and I will mention a little bit later in the video about the other Olympic and Commonwealth Games ceremonies that celebrate the satanic, openly mocking the masses, for they are ultimately parading their victory over the acquisition of human consciousness. You see, the fallen ones, as it is denoted in the scripture, the fallen angels, they have a problem that humanity does not have. Their problem is that they cannot create from a blank canvas. You cannot give a fallen one a blank piece of paper and ask it to create. It can only dissect, analyze, and mimic pre-existing creation. That means that the light of humanity, the consciousness of humanity, the collective output of humanity's intelligence is a valued prize. And if we are steered in a specific direction, then the output of our intelligence and that which we create is a resource of the fallen. Our ability to create can go in multiple directions. But by dragging mankind's consciousness and awareness into the world, external into the world, then the collective output of our technology, of our intelligence, goes in one specific direction. And the fallen ones have meticulously brought humanity into the space where we persistently seek for meaning in the external, in the comfortable prison cell of worldly desire, in the comfortable prison cell of worldly entertainment. And the Olympic Games is the Grand Colosseum. The Grand Colosseum is everywhere now, with streaming platforms such as Netflix, with the internet, with the pornography industry, with the stadiums and the sports that we engage in a tribal manner there. All of this is the Grand Colosseum. And I am not putting down sport and activity, but you have to understand that if humans are drawing the meaning of life from external competition and entertainment, humanity is being lured into that Colosseum of old that used to, and still stands in Rome, be filled with something far more heinous. It is all about dragging the awareness of man into the world and the matrix of extraction, where he doesn't awaken his power of Christ. For there we continue to be a fuel cell in this machine that the fallen world and fallen angels have ultimately created around the species that we are in our enslavement to that fallen state. If, therefore, we look at this topic, I would ask that we look without emotion, without attachment. If we look at what they did in this Olympic ceremony, there is definite satanic symbology. Whether you have understood it or it's gone over your head or not, it is there. And they are mocking you. They are mocking that your children and you are persistently, constantly externalized in your search for meaning, where you are owned by the God of this world, for you rely on this world for any meaning and sensation you are addicted to. As I unpack this satanic symbology so that you can see it, so that you can set your awareness free and ask, is this meticulous orchestrated deception and the ceremonies that they choreograph for the masses to be mocked by an actuality, or is it just some fanciful notion of the religious? I'll start with the one that has caused the most controversy, the show of a trans or drag queen version of The Last Supper. The Last Supper is a painting by Da Vinci that is referencing the meal before Christ's crucifixion. Now, even if you are not religious, what does that symbolize? It symbolizes the very highest of love within inside the human story. To lay down your life for others, to lay down your life for the well-being of people that you may never meet. To honor that great charity, healing and love that Christ brought. And to understand that inside this fallen world, a bullseye is drawn on the chest of those who bring that love. I know I have witnessed it endlessly in the work that we are doing. This is a symbol of humanity finding the truth that we must live by that higher love, which is not about self-obsession and gratification of our own personal desires and five-sense pleasures, but it is about walking in the Spirit, where we offer our bodies as a living sacrifice to a love which is far greater than the pursuit of the comfortable prison cell of worldly desire. Yeshua represents that teaching in the most dominant way in the human story, that we must overcome the flesh and walk in the Spirit, that we must sidestep this fallen nature of ours, this slave nature of ours, where our energy is extracted, and stand in something greater, a higher octave of consciousness, where a great love and unity and truth can be born and animate the intelligence of man. This is what Yeshua represents. This is what Christ is. And when we see something like the Last Supper being recreated around a movement that is ultimately the LGBTQ and the Pride movement, then we are seeing a direct mockery of humanity's enslavement to the satanic, enslavement to the flesh, to entertainment, to pleasure, instead of to the eternal strength of spirit and the compassion born from there. Pride is not something that man should celebrate. Pride is what makes us fall. Pride is what made the angelic fall. To celebrate pride, not only to celebrate pride, but not pride in humility, not pride in virtuousness, not pride in charity and selfless service, but pride in our sexual proclivity, pride in that which we want to do sexually with our bodies, not pride in creating children and procreating, but pride in the attainment of pleasure through sexual preference. This is what that whole movement is based around. And if you look at the world, if you have a planet that is operating from humility and not pride, you are going to have a very beautiful world. You are going to have a world where people are compassionate and loving towards one another. But if you have a world that operates in pride and sexual proclivity, where does that go when the core identity of people is based around the sensations their bodies can attain, is based around their own preferences when it comes to sexual activity? You are speaking into a movement that glorifies identification with sensory gratification over identification with humility and service to a higher love. One side will give birth to great charity and great development for humanity. The other will create a self-absorbed black hole inside the user. And one side will generate a lot of pain and suffering. People will be confused about who and what they are as they continue to search in this identity of pride and hedonism and pride and sexual preference as their core self. And in doing so, they create this cocoon, an image of me inside of them. And that image creates a separation from the truth of our identity in Christ, or our identity in the unity with all things. We have to understand, even if pride was heterosexual, it would be exactly the same story. We are focusing on gratification of pleasure. We are focusing on gratification of the senses. We are focusing an identity on the proclivity of sexual preference. How can this at all be anything but a reference to mankind's fall into the flesh, as Yeshua called it, and away from the spirit? The flesh is the enslavement to the satanic extraction matrix. The spirit is freedom from it. Now, when we are targeted by the fallen, we can either become unwitting pawns where our energy is extracted, and when that energy is extracted, we are simply a fuel cell in the satanic extraction matrix. Or we can also become those that build structures, be they in thought, in physicality, in spiritual movement. We build movement and build structures within the world that propagates the ability for the fallen ones to extract that energy. The Olympics is the grand Colesseum, and the man who carried the torch was Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg has spent many years creating an external entertainment world, and Snoop Dogg, as he carried that flame, wore around his neck the icon of Satan, the Baphomet. The Baphomet is the icon that the celebrities who have gone into that world and have said, listen to the enemy, I will build for you structures inside human consciousness and inside this world so that you can extract more and more energy through the operating system of flesh by my fellow man. I will help you to build structures to keep them in the flesh. Many celebrities stand in the Baphomet pose, or have Baphomet tattoos, or wear Baphomet jewelry to show their allegiance to the God of this world, not the Christ. I have seen it with people like Madonna. I've referenced that in a previous life, Russell Brand used to often throw Baphomet symbology. Russell Brand, who I'll get onto, as he was in an Olympic ceremony which was seemingly filled with satanic occult symbology, the same as this one. This is the second sign that you have that this is a satanic ceremony. The bringer of the light for the Grand Colosseum opening is a man wearing a Baphomet necklace, a man who has built many structures inside the consciousness of humanity to ensure that humans stay locked in the flesh and glorifying the flesh. Beyond there, if that was not enough, they had a golden bull at the Olympic ceremony. The golden bull represents the Baal worship. Baal was the god of child sacrifice. The golden bull represents humanity symbolically, identifying with these worldly identities and worshipping them as their god. The golden calf was the story in Moses that the Israelites made a golden calf in rebellion ultimately. They turned away from the living God here and now and began to worship an idol. Inside our modern day society, there are those who know in their allegiance with Satan that they are idols for the masses, and the energy they receive, celebrities and the like, is a profoundly powerful, potent energy as the masses in their delusional state worship and glorify and channel their essence into the image of these celebrities, into the image of structures such as government, etc. also. And we worship the idols. And the golden bull is a representation that instead of being in the presence of awakened state, the living God, where you can engage with God without thought, that humanity is living, worshipping idols, images in thought of who they are and who various other parties are. Beyond there, it is also the Baal cult. Baal was a representation of a cult of child sacrifice. Child sacrifice is a massive problem in this world. Right now, I am about to start a campaign here, as the president made an announcement last week in Tanzania about the immense increase in children disappearing due to organ harvesting and child sacrifice, as they fear it's in relation to the upcoming political elections. This, however, runs a little deeper, for we have also the discussion around abortion. And people say it's pro-life, pro-choice. You are talking about a baby who feels pain being torn apart. You are talking about a living being. Now, yes, it's a complicated and vast topic, but the solution is not to continue in that way. The solution is to change the Babylonian fallen system so that people have righteousness and temperance and discipline to not be getting impregnated by using their sexual proclivity as a worldly distraction from the fact they feel uncomfortable as they are not united with their Creator. It is a huge topic, but we are seeing child sacrifice. We are seeing it. That is what we are seeing en masse, energetically speaking. Now, beyond there, if you look at Aleister Crowley was one of the most prolific writers about child sacrifice of our time. And for all predominantly, he wrote about a different form than people realized. He did, in his writings, mention the perfect sacrifice being a young boy, etc. However, what he also did was label masturbation as child sacrifice. I have seen writers of the Marvel series on YouTube, you can watch it yourself, promoting to children who are reading the X-Men comic and so on, that if they draw a certain symbol and masturbate on it, sacrifice their children, then the universe, as they call it, or Satan, the god of this world, will reward them with whatever they want to manifest. We are living in a time of mass child sacrifice. How many men are weak and frail and addicted to the orgasm? How many men are unable to maintain that essence? How many men are sacrificing, in the words of Crowley, their children? This is a very important topic. For if you look around you, if you go to the average city in the West on an evening, there's a good chance that 80% of the homes with drawn curtains will have somebody in there who is engaging in uncouth behavior, who is addicted by the enemy's temptations to selling the life force they have into that energy extraction matrix. And therefore the golden calf represents our current state of idolizing and also our current mass state of child sacrifice, be it physical, like that which I'm tackling here, or be it through the abortions, or be it through what we are seeing with the rampant addiction to pornography at this time. An addiction which is vulgar and vile and corrupting us from the inside out. The fastest growing genre of pornography is incest. You can't tell me it's harmless. It's changing the whole of consciousness. It's making the species more and more demonic and less angelic as we continue on that road. It doesn't stop there. There was also the pale rider. And they say that this rider was representing the Joan of Arc, I believe, but it doesn't fit the depiction. And if you look at how they set it up and they placed this rider in front of the Eiffel Tower with the wings, it's clearly the pale rider, the pale white horse and its rider of Revelation, who comes galloping with Hades behind him, which is hell, which is the devil, which is Satan. And the hell that it speaks of is the immense perpetuation of suffering that humanity is going through because we continue to sell our essence, our life force, into the possession of the energy extraction matrix. We are taking persistently our essence of vitality. And if you would take these confused young men and women who are suffering and struggling to find an identity, who are struggling with apparently ill health and a lack of discipline, and you would just sit them alone for a while, Just let them go through that discomfort. Stop cocooning them in a space where they can always have the comfort of their every whim desire that the demonic is suggesting they should have. And just let them pass through the discomfort of a few weeks of just fasting, letting the dust settle on life, letting the dust settle on their addictions to the world. You would begin to return those children back to the original core self. And that core self is the loving awareness of Christ that has been dragged into this fallen world and is being extracted. For the light of God is a sought after energy by the fallen ones, and it can only be accessed when sentient life with free will offers it to the fallen. And this is what we are seeing in our youth. This is what we are seeing in this hedonistic way of life that is being dressed as love and light and spirituality, is being dressed as movements of freedom and liberalism. This is a time where humanity needs to start to study and see what they are doing. These symbols, the Baphomet head mocking the Christ's Last Supper, the pale rider riding in Revelation, the whole situation, the golden bowl, the idol worship, the mockery of the horrendous levels of child sacrifice in their terminology that they are harnessing from humanity, the millions, billions of men and women who are persistently selling their essence into yet another memory of pleasure. That is the way of life. I'll store just one more memory of pleasure today. That's the culmination of this wondrous creation. All of my ancestry, all of the stars that formed into this human form of matter, the consciousness within it, the connection to the Christ, all of that wonder and vastness is going to live out its life just storing yet another memory of pleasure, another memory of pleasure, another memory of pleasure. We are being mocked. We are being deceived. We are being dragged away from our Christ power and into the tomb of the flesh, into the tomb of the fallen world and the fallen slave self. And they are parading it. They are parading it in front of you. And this Olympic ceremony is not the only one. The Commonwealth Games in 2022, they also worshipped Baal, child sacrifice. They worship this god of child sacrifice and also the god that we are living in worship of idols, idols that we create in our own thought, idols in the celebrity nature, and we channel all of our energy, all of our gratuity into these icons, into these idols on the screen or of our own creation in our intelligence. And in doing so, we do not give it to the Creator. And therefore, in doing so, we give it to the God of this world. That Commonwealth Games ceremony was clearly Baal worship, and it was clearly referencing Lucifer. If, however, you then look further back at the 2012 Olympic ceremony, in the 2012 Olympic ceremony, there seemed to be argument that if there are meticulous orchestrated deceptions in this world, and if indeed people are choreographing the ceremonies to be a way to taunt and to mock humanity, then in the 2012 Olympics, if you look, you will see first and foremost the location was no accident. Every street around the location of the 2012 London Olympics had some sort of biblical name, be it Church Street and so on. Bethany Gardens was 3.3 miles away. We had this very strange culmination of events that you have this one location to have this 2012 ceremony. And this orchestrated, meticulous deception is all about steering human consciousness in a direction that is useful to the fallen ones. And so within there, you had this very unusual and somewhat coincidental event which has to have questions asked about it. And that was that there was a giant Boris Johnson puppet sitting up in an NHS hospital bed in that 2012 Olympic ceremony. There was also this scene of many people in hospital beds and these ghouls chasing around, and many felt that it was a pre-programmed telling of the COVID pandemic. For Boris Johnson at the time of 2012 was not the Prime Minister, but during the pandemic when he was the Prime Minister, for certain he sat up inside that hospital bed on national television as he had COVID, according to the narrative. If, though, you look at this giant puppet sitting up in the bed, you can then look that there was a news headline in the UK that made no sense. The week before that 2012 ceremony, Boris Johnson said, "London 2012 Olympics excitement is spreading like some kind of benign virus." And so it appeared that they were introducing something in this occult ceremony, if indeed this meticulous, organised deception is there. And I ask the question, is it so? Are they taunting you? Are they using satanic symbology to taunt the masses? Inside the 2012 Olympic ceremony, I've spoken about this often, but Russell Brand was also there, who is now professing to be a Christian, and more power to him. But he was in one of these ceremonies, and that ceremony was very unusual, as he was dressed as a child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but inverted. And inside the bus that he'd caught, the people within were New Age looking spiritual people. And there was discussion and suspicion that he was being introduced as a Pied Piper who would capture the attention of the awakening spiritual masses and bring them back to the mainstream media, where they would slumber yet again in the idol, the identification with the birth certificate identity and their nationality and all of that toolbox and rules of how a human functions there, instead of awakening into their Christic power, where that toolbox is irrelevant and now you work by the supernatural power of Christ. This was part of the 2012 Olympic ceremony. He was there. He was dressed that way. At the same time, his children's book was coming out called The Pied Piper of Hamelin. So you have a theme, child catcher, Pied Piper. At the same time, there were four policewomen with flashing police lights on their head, which kind of speaks into the recent allegations last year that he went through. There is a lot of discussion around these Olympic ceremonies, and there's a lot to unpack, but it takes a keen eye. It takes awareness without emotion. It takes love without attachment for your intelligence to be free and to see what I am saying. It is of vast importance that we understand that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Even some of these celebrities that are involved in these satanic ceremonies and rituals are possibly simply unwitting pawns and puppets inside that game. They may have never had contact with the demonic. They may have no even acknowledgement of the fallen. They may not even have anything on their sphere of Christ and the fallen. And as such, they simply become vulnerable parties that can be animated by that spiritual dimension which is deceptive. From celebrity to choreographer to producer to actor to performer, whatever we wish to call it, you should return to them love. In their ignorance, they have made mistakes. In their ignorance, they have mocked the God of all creation, our Christ, our Father. But they are unfortunate victims as well. Many of them have no allegiance or open allegiance with the satanic. They have no idea what they are doing. But the problem is that all it takes is the global cult and its black magicians, who are profoundly powerful and skilled, to send the lower astral forces into these structures, into these plans. And if they recruit the right type of person, you can recruit someone who's very jovial and positive and smiley. But if they are living in a specific way, which is predominantly whereby the body is living in the flesh, not the spirit, or to unpack that a little better, they are living in pursuit of gratification of the five senses and an image of personal self and personal history and its desires. And in doing so, do not think to store the vitality and offer it in service to the Christ and its fellow man. If we are, in other words, missing the mark and living in sin, we are vulnerable to becoming unwitting puppets and assailants to further Satan's kingdom in the human story. And this is where many of them are. And so you should return to them only love. Don't return outrage. Don't return anger. Anger and outrage is like an acid, and you hold it inside of you for the other person. It corrodes you, and when it corrodes you, you do not resonate with the octave of the Christ. You begin to suffer, you begin to separate. And so return love to these parties. They don't know. Many of them don't know. They are being deceived. They are living in the deception. And let it be a lesson to us that even a little bit of remaining with acceptance of sin, glorification of sin, worship of it, can leave us vulnerable to demonic possession. And in demonic influence and possession, we aren't even going to know which ideas are our own and which are the agenda of the fallen. And many of these parties involved in these ceremonies that bring together all of this satanic symbology into one location over and over again, ceremony after ceremony, they are unwitting victims of the fallen. Some are in open allegiance, but the vast majority, they are just vessels that are empty and therefore influenced, and by empty I mean void of the presence of the Christ. For they are not building themselves up, they are not fasting, they are not praying, they are not even intending to overcome the world and the self. I shall leave it there. We are being mocked by a fallen species is how I perceive this. We are being mocked by the fallen and their ability to enslave us to the flesh. And they taunt the masses and they taunt God with these ceremonies. And lo and behold, many will continue to march down that road in the name of love and liberalism, that it's all okay. But it's not. And child sacrifice is a backbone and a stronghold of their power. And it's taking forms that many of us have stepped over. And many of us have emotional attachment and outrage that is unrelated to any spiritual sense of the enemy in Christ, and all about personal preference and opinion. But I'm speaking into something deeper, a metaphysical change of a metaphysical danger to us continuing to pursue and disregard the power of life and creation as we currently are. And that's why they put the icons of Baal all over the place. For they have the collective consciousness in a space where mass child sacrifice is very much acceptable, be it the physical killing of children as I am fighting here in Tanzania, or be it the overuse of masturbation with men and pornography industry, or be it indeed the abortion situation that is terrorizing many infants in this world who have not had a chance to take their first breath. We live in very trying times. Keep the faith. I love you all. Return only love to those that the fallen have taken out of the reach of Christ's compassion. Perhaps your love will be an extension of that reach to bring them back to the truth and away from the suffering where they no doubt are. I love you all. God bless, guys.